So when it comes to A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, so much happens in season 1 that we decided to kind of present a bit of a breakdown while also presenting what could happen, what should happen, and also what we hope may happen in a potential season 2. So to begin, let's go out big and just start off with what happened to Andie Bell. And I should note, nothing but spoilers. All the spoilers are going to be in this. So the short version of a long story is Andie got into a bit of a tussle with Elliot, who is Naomi and Kara's father, and is also one of the teachers, I believe, of English at Pip and Kara's school in their whole friend group. So Elliot used to date Andie back in the day when she was much younger. She's barely 17, 18 at the point where she died. And she decided to go to him, try to blackmail him out of £5,000. Elliot refused. They got into a bit of a push and shove match, and Elliot shoved her, and it seems Andie hit her head. It wasn't hard enough to kill her, but it was hard enough to do the type of damage where she should have went to the hospital. But instead, she just lost the fight, decided to go home, and that's when she is confronted by her little sister Becca. Now, Andie and Becca, unbeknownst to most people, are a bit of wild childs, and Andie was a drug dealer who sold more than just like weed. She sold the type of drugs that are very much illegal, and one of those illegal drugs she sold led to Becca being assaulted by Max, who is the local rich kid and is also, oddly enough, one of Ravi's best friends. But one of the main issues that happen when it comes to that confrontation is that Andie cares less about what happened to Becca, and her focus is more so on not getting in trouble. This makes, of course, Becca mad because of what just happened to her, not getting kind of sympathy or support from her sister. So she shoves Andie, and when Andie lands, that's it. She's dead. And luckily for Becca, but not for anybody else in the situation, Becca was told by Andie where there's a well, and it just happens to be at one of the calamity parties where, Becca and Andie frequented, and she pretty much takes her sister's body there, and her body has been at the bottom of that well for about 5 years and nobody knew. Now, to get to the long version of the story, Andie wanted out of Little Kilton, and we're not told why. But we can assume because it's a small town, she wanted to go to the city, college, just get away. And so in order to do that, she dealt drugs because her supplier, Howie, used her innocence, or the look of innocence she had, so that not only at the calamity parties, but also places that he can't go because he looks a little bit sketchy, she can go and sell the drugs. Now, while Andie was selling drugs, Sal was trying to help to craft a plan so they could run away together, but Sal was never for her selling drugs, which was always an issue. But with that in mind, to kind of speed things up, Andie decided to try to blackmail Elliot, who, again, she briefly dated when she was underage. And that was supposed to help bridge the gap using that £5,000, but unfortunately, that was a no. So with that in mind, they first fought verbally, then things got physical. And then somewhere in Elliot's twisted mind, he thought maybe before things got really bad they can reconcile, but once that was clear it wasn't going to happen because Andie moved on with Sal. Sal came to pushing, she hit her head on a counter, and while it wasn't fatal, it did give her the type of concussion that should have been looked at by a doctor. Fast forward to when she gets home, again, Andie makes it back home, learns Becca's been assaulted by Max with the drugs that Andie sold him. She's more worried about getting in trouble with police and everything instead of what happened to Becca. So Becca shoves her, and she doesn't survive this fall, and she ends up actually suffocating on her own bodily fluids. But point of the matter is, Becca watches her sister die, takes a bite to where Andie showed her in the caves where the calamity parties happen, and she dumped her body there and pretty much cleaned her hands of it. So, getting to the next storyline is what happened to Singh, because it's far more complicated than what we originally are told. In the case of he killed Andie, and then because of guilt killed himself. Because as we just said in the first one, Becca did the final blow, but technically Elliot killed Andie, and Becca's the one who hit the body. So Sal is completely innocent in this, but unfortunately, as noted in the review, Ravi made it clear that, well, Sal was this clean-cut guy who never had any troubles, hence why he was the best boy at school. There's this racist undertone in a small town, so, brown kid being involved with this blonde-haired, light-eyed white girl, easy target. Then he gets very confrontational and angry when he's investigating, being questioned. So it didn't look good for him. So in many ways, if what we're about to say didn't happen, more than likely Sal would have still ended up in jail, but at least he would have been alive. But let's break down what happened to Sal. So remember Elliot? Elliot didn't know about Becca's part in Andie's body disappearing. All he knew is that what he did. So with that in mind, he took advantage of knowing his daughter Naomi, with Max and Jake, who we don't see at all in a physical sense in this season, were involved in a hit and run. Max coerced Dan, who was a cop, to cover it up since Max knew Dan and Andie had a thing at one time. And again, Andie was underage when this stuff happened, which is a really weird, consistent thing with this show and her. But moving on. And the only reason why Elliot knew about the hit and runs because Elliot was reading Naomi's diary, trying to figure out what's going on with her. And with her detailing what happened, he got what he needed, and he forced his daughter and her friends anonymously through blackmail he forced them to recant their alibis so that Sal no longer had any type of defense about where he was at the time. And within days, of course, Sal was being questioned regarding what he did, what he didn't do. He blew up in an investigation room, as Dan was one of the people in there who testifies to this. And then on top of that, unfortunately, within a few days, Elliot figures out a way to draw him out into the woods. He drugs him, chokes him out, and leaves his body in some type of cabin or a little small lodge thing, some rinky-dink place. And he uses Sal's phone in order to text the dad that he's sorry, and that text message that he sends to his dad is used as a confession for Andie's murder. But as Ravi notes, as he talks with Pip, the text message is a bit weird because it has perfect punctuation. Meanwhile, even though Sal was just noted to be like the best boy and all that, it seems in text messages he didn't really put the same kind of effort into what he wrote out. So in his regular text messages, there wasn't punctuation and all that type of stuff. But Elliot, being an English teacher, he had all that when he sent that final message. But seemingly nobody for 5 years picked that up in a notable way until both Pip and Ravi were investigating what happened to not only Andie, but also trying to prove Sal's innocence. So, with those two major storylines over, let's get into the smaller ones. And that would be, for example, who was sending the threatening text messages, notes, and also killed Pip's dog, Barney. Because they do kill a dog in this murder mystery. And when it comes to the notes, it's clear that Elliot at least did one, because Pip prints from his computer and she gets one of the notes that was sent to her. Now, as for the text messages, Max and Becca both had a lot to lose if Pip learned the truth, and when it comes to Barney, I would say Becca probably killed him, as Elliot was out of town with his girl, so it's doubtful that he killed the dog. And as for Max, well, I can definitely say he's more likely to be the person who sent the text messages, since Becca, even when she was trying to kill Pip, seemingly wasn't much for using curse words and calling Pip a B-word or anything like that. Max did use that language, so when it comes to my opinion on things, since I don't feel like it's necessarily like hard facts when it comes to the TV show, might be for the books. Max more than likely sent the text messages. Becca probably killed Barney. And Elliot definitely sent the notes. Which leads to the last storyline we'll talk about, and that's why was Victor at the Ivy House Hotel. And for context, Victor is Pip's stepdad, and her biological dad apparently died when she was very young, 1 or 2, to the point where she can't remember him, but that's a whole different thing that's not really gone on to in this show. What matters is Victor and why he was at the Ivy House, and from what we're told, despite appearances, Victor did not have an affair or else even contemplated one. His issue was that he grew up with an idea of what was required for the perfect life, and while he had a family and a financial stability, he was unhappy. So originally he thought it was his family that was making him unhappy because he had his kid who may have not been with Leanne, who is Pip's mom, and then he had, of course, Pip, and then, of course, there's Leanne, and having kids with someone or else raising kids with someone, it shifts the dynamics and the priorities of your partner. And it seems for a short period of time, he thought if he focused on himself and also his work, he'll be happy. But while at the Ivy House Hotel, he realized it's not his family that's making him unhappy, it's his work. So he decided to readjust what's important to him, and that led to Victor coming off like this perfect guy for most of the season. So with that, let's go into some of the honorable mentions in terms of storylines. Like, for example, do Pip and Ravi get together? Yes. And they even kiss in the season finale. Do we find out who leaked Nat's nudes? Nat being one of Andie's friends? The answer is no. We never learn the answer to that question, even though that should be something for second season. But going by the briefs that you can find on Wikipedia about the books, it doesn't seem like that ever becomes a thing. But, TV series can expand where books don't. Anyway, in terms of what happened to Pip's biological dad, all we're told is that he died around the time that Pip was 1 year old, but again, it's not really gone into the details. And lastly, there's a question of who is Isla. And Isla Jordan pretty much seals the deal that when it comes to Elliot, there's something twisted there, because she's a runaway who Elliot discovered at a bus stop, and he took her to his old house for back when his wife was alive. Now, to Naomi and Kara, that house was sold, but apparently he kept it somehow. And while at first Elliot was very nice and seemed just given a place to stay the night, like many on the show, he decided to confess things, specifically how he killed Sal, and from that point on, Isla was locked up into the attic until Pip came about, learned she was there, exposed her, and eventually exposed Becca so that Becca can get arrested. So in terms of season 2, these are the storylines that we think could happen, should happen, or in some ways we kind of hope happen. And first and foremost is Pip taking down Max Hastings, which is kind of hinted at because it seems like Pip is going to direct her focus towards him at the end of the season, especially because even if Becca did hide her sister's body and also let the final blow and also tried to kill Pip, Pip still looks at it as part of all this that happened is because of Max assaulting Becca, and because, Max was a consistent customer of Andie, Becca's just one of many. So from Pip, it seems like in season 2, one of the main storylines could be Pip taking down not only Max, but potentially his family, since more than likely they helped to cover up a lot of his stuff, especially when you factor in not only the assaults, but also the hit and run. Another storyline that can come up is senior year, because from what we're told, Pip is a junior at this point, and between Pip and her friends being juniors going on seniors, with that being the final year, and of course Pip trying to go off to college/university, there's also Pip going to prom, Kara pursuing a relationship with Ruby because, well, the last time we saw them they were making out, I'm not sure if both of the girls are dating yet, but it seems like they could be. Hard to say. But probably the most important thing that the second season can do, especially with the focus on senior year, is build up Pip and Kara's friends who aren't even noted in her character guide, because outside of one wanting to go into film school, that's really the only thing we learn about them. Going further, the next thing that could potentially be a storyline is Naomi having primary custody of Kara because, you know, their father is in jail, their mother's dead, and in some ways you can see with Ravi no longer being the pariah or his family, that will probably become what Kara and also Naomi have to go through. So they could be, as Pip tries to remain friends with Kara, Ravi kind of guiding them in some ways of how to handle all this as the brown people in the area. And on top of that, one of the other things that have to be handled is Naomi doesn't have a job, so the struggle of her trying to get a job after what her father did is definitely something that's going to be a focus. It may lead to more issues as, you know, bills pile up and, you know, things have to change for her and Kara. Which leads to the next thing, which will be meeting Jake, because it's kind of weird that we meet Sal, Naomi, and even Max, but Jake is far, far away. And while we see him in archival footage and in photos, it would be interesting to see his part of this friend dynamic that sometimes comes off a little bit weird. Never mind meet his family and learn how they dealt with things, because with the way Ravi's talking about as an Indian person in England, imagine what Jake's family, who I'm assuming is, well, the way that these shows works, more likely it's going to be Nigerian. But that point aside, how he as a Nigerian English person or black English person, however you want to put it, dealt with being in a small town could be interesting, especially in order to compare and contrast, never mind kind of going to how he got out. Following that is just finding out who leaked Nat's nudes. I mean, all signs point to Max, and if it wasn't Max, it could have been Andie, and if it wasn't Andie, it could have been Becca, but who knows if it might have been another party involved. And I mean, the main reason I even bring up Nat is because she seemed like an interesting and nice character who's just been through stuff because her family was poor for so long. But I don't know, I just feel like when it comes to that character, I want her storyline to be resolved. And that leads to the last potential storyline, and that's just Pip and Ravi's relationship, and just exploring what it can mean for both. Because with Ravi, I'm not sure how much older he is than Pip, but he kind of put his life on hold because of what happened to his brother Sal. So with him playing catch up, how is that going to work with Pip, who's very much a senior at this point, who is in her first relationship, going for all these things because of that. And on top of that, she's potentially investigating what happened to all the girls that Max assaulted, maybe what happened with Nat, and who leaked her picture, and then of course all that's going on with Kara, and then of course they're probably going to throw in some drama with her family. Never mind, since we didn't get to see Andie and Ravi's relationship, what if they decide to explore the cultural differences between Pip and also Ravi, and kind of reflect not only what they're going through, but also throw in what Leanne and Victor gone through in order to kind of show how interrelational relationships can work. It's just, it requires some work. I mean, there's so much that can be done when it comes to the second season, and what we went through was probably just like disservice to maybe mid-level, but I'm sure for those who read the books, there's so much more that has to be explored that we can't even fathom right now.